With Avengers Age of Ultron out on Blu-ray and DVD now, let's take a look at 50 of the best Easter eggs and references in the second Avengers outing. If you haven't seen Age of Ultron yet, just be aware there are spoilers ahead for the film and future Marvel movies. In Age of Ultron, Captain America's shield has been upgraded with magnetic elements so he can call it back to him. Avengers comics from the early 60s also showed Tony Stark upgraded Cap's shield in a similar manner. The new shield also echoes Stark's ability to call his Iron Man suits to him, as we saw in Iron Man 3 and after Loki pushed him out of Stark Tower in the Avengers movie. During Captain America's face-off with Ultron on top of a speeding truck, there's a nice nod to the late 1970s Captain America TV movies starring Reb Brown. In Age of Ultron, Cap's shield falls down to the road where Black Widow scoops it up and places it on the front of her motorbike, echoing the look of Reb Brown's 70s bike, which featured a round windshield reminiscent of Cap's shield. During the Avengers attack on Strucker's Hydra base, Thor hits Captain America's shield with his hammer, creating a sonic shockwave that knocks their enemies on their asses and takes out their tank. This is a cool callback with a twist to the Avengers movie where the Asgardian god and the US super soldier first saw the effect of their hammer and shield combo in the movies. However, that time they were on opposing sides in an argument over Loki, and Cap demanded Thor put down his hammer, which he did as he flew through the air, smashing it into Cap's vibranium shield, causing a shockwave that raised the forest around them. For more on Cap's shield as well as all things Avengers, check out my video 12 Things You Didn't Know About Avengers Age of Ultron. The epic slow-mo shot that shows the Avengers in mid-air poses as they attack Strucker's men during their raid of his Hydra research base in Sokovia feels like something that could have been torn straight from the pages of a comic book. Director Joss Whedon said that what he wants to say with that shot is, "Here's a comic book movie and here's a feeling you came to get." When Tony Stark enters the Hydra base, he discovers the remains of a Leviathan, one of the enormous beasts used as alien warships during the Battle of New York in the first Avengers movie. Joss Whedon and Zach Penn created the Leviathans especially for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, the word Leviathan does crop up elsewhere in the comics and in Agent Carter as the name of a secret Soviet organization. Tony Stark's dark vision of the Avengers defeated reminds me of the nightmares he had in Iron Man 3 following the PTSD suffered after the Battle of New York. Stan Lee couldn't budge Thor's hammer in the first Thor movie, and in Age of Ultron he couldn't keep up with Thor's drinking either. Playing a World War II veteran, Lee tries to prove Thor wrong that his special Asgardian liquor is not meant for mortal men, but he ends up sozzled, slurring his catchphrase Excelsior, which is Latin for ever upward and is also the state motto of New York. New York-born Lee has used the phrase Excelsior repeatedly over the years in his columns for Marvel Comics and in the title of his autobiography. The liquor that Thor says mortals can't handle was aged for 1,000 years in the barrels built from the wreck of Brunhilde's fleet. Brunhilde is a character in Marvel's comics. She was picked by Thor's father Odin to lead a host of warrior goddesses known as Valkyrior. Brunhilde was actually considered as a potential character for Thor the Dark World, though didn't make the cut. Perhaps this mention is a sign we'll see her in Thor Ragnarok, a storyline that includes Brunhilde in the comics. During the Avengers party, Anthony Mackie's character Sam Wilson, aka Falcon, tells Captain America that he's happy chasing cold leads on our missing persons case, which is a reference to Cap's best friend and fellow army man Bucky Barnes, who became the Winter Soldier assassin after experiments by Hydra and then disappeared after saving Cap at the end of the second Captain America movie. Last time we saw Bucky, he was at the Smithsonian Museum dressed in civilian clothes and looking at the Bucky Barnes display in the Captain America exhibit. During the Avengers after party, when Steve Rogers tries to lift Thor's hammer, he can't quite manage it, but he does move it a little, which is a nod to the comic books where Cap has been deemed worthy to lift the Asgardian god's hammer, for example in issue 390 of The Mighty Thor back in 1988. And in the movie, when Natasha Romanoff refuses to take her turn to lift the hammer, her remark, "That's not a question I need answered," is a sly allusion to the fact that Black Widow already proved herself worthy of wielding Thor's hammer in issue 3 of the 2014 comic book miniseries What If? Age of Ultron. At the end of Age of Ultron, Captain America wonders if Thor left his hammer in an elevator and the elevator moved, whether that would mean the elevator was worthy. Thor laughs this off, but that little exchange recalls a funny moment in Thor: The Dark World, where the Asgardian god hung his hammer on a coat hook in Jane's apartment. Just before the Avengers have their visions, Thor warns Captain America that Scarlet Witch has tried to warp his mind and tells him, "Take special care. I doubt a human could keep her at bay. Fortunately, I am mighty," which is a nice nod to the title of the Mighty Thor comics as well as the 1960s animated TV series of the same name. When Ultron first becomes conscious and starts trawling for information, we see various images from other Marvel movies, including one of Tony Stark from the beginning of the first Iron Man film. While Black Widow goes for her gun during the Avengers' first face-off with Ultron, Tony Stark grabs a fondue fork to battle Ultron's bots. That fondue fork is a playful nod to the movie Captain America: The First Avenger, where Tony's father Howard Stark says to Peggy Carter, "I thought we could stop off in Lucerne for a late-night fondue," which leads Cap to awkwardly ask Peggy, "So are you two? Do you fondue?" When Ultron first appears to the Avengers, he makes several references in his speech to strings and puppets. Then, after Thor smashes him with his hammer, we hear Ultron sing his very creepy version of a few lines from the song "I've Got No Strings," which featured in the 1940 Disney animated film Pinocchio, about a wooden puppet who wants to become a real boy. And we even hear a little clip from the original version of the song. When Ultron first speaks to Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, he's wearing a red cloak, which is a reference to his identity in the comics as a crimson cowl. When Ultron tells Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver that invaders create Avengers, it's a nod to the comic book superhero team The Invaders, which was co-created by Roy Thomas and whose original lineup included Captain America, Bucky Barnes and the Submariner. Black Widow's vision of the Red Room gives us an insight into the painful process that made her the character we know today, and through her graduation ceremony also provides a link with Bruce Banner, who can't have children either. Natasha's Red Room vision is a nod to both Marvel's comics and the TV series Agent Carter, and their Soviet espionage training program which turns young girls into super spies. The film's ballet scenes refer back to the Black Widow's origins in the comic books, where, depending on the story arc, she either trained as a ballerina or was implanted with false memories to think she was one. As for Natasha's enforced sterilization, that's a nod to writer Richard K. Morgan's Black Widow miniseries. During Captain America's vision, he sees Peggy Carter in a Second World War ballroom, and she asks him, "Are you ready for our dance?" After which we see them briefly dance together. This recalls the scene in Captain America: The Winter Soldier when Cap visited an elderly Peggy in her retirement home. Peggy was taken aback to see him after so many years, to which Cap replied, "Well, I couldn't leave my best girl, not when she owes me a dance." Also in the dance hall where Cap's vision takes place, there's a band playing called the Roy Thomas Players. Roy Thomas is a comic book writer and was editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics after Stan Lee in the 1970s. Thomas co-created many Marvel characters including Ultron, Vision and Iron Fist. Thor's vision sets us up for the next Thor solo movie, Ragnarok. In Norse mythology, Ragnarok means the doom or twilight of the gods, and it's also an apocalyptic event in the comics that results in numerous significant deaths and the destruction of Asgard. By the way, in the comics, Ragnarok is also the name of a Thor clone co-created by Tony Stark from a strand of the Asgardian god's hair. Which is interesting because in Age of Ultron, after Stark fails to lift Thor's enchanted hammer, he suggests the handle is imprinted with a security code matched to Thor's fingerprints. So according to Stark's logic, anyone with Thor's fingerprints could wield it, for example, a clone. Age of Ultron marks the 5th film where an MCU character has grabbed Tony Stark by the throat. In the first Avengers movie, it was Loki who did it. In Iron Man 3, it was Guy Pearce's character Aldrich Killian. In Iron Man 2, it was Black Widow. And in Iron Man, it was Jeff Bridges' character Obadiah Stone. This time it's Thor who gets to grips with Stark's jugular, and Ultron has a go too. But Stark isn't the only Avenger to get throttled in this movie. Thor gets similar treatment at the hands of Ultron, as does Vision, and Captain America not only gets it from Ultron but also 2 of his drones. And that isn't all. The Hulk also gets it in the neck from Iron Man in his Hulkbuster suit, while in his Vision, Thor gets choked by Heimdall. Joss Whedon has said he gave the name Veronica to Tony Stark's new armor system, which deploys the Hulkbuster suit via satellite, because Veronica is the opposite of Betty. Betty is Bruce Banner's love interest in the comics and the Incredible Hulk movie, and the Veronica Whedon refers to is likely Veronica Lodge from Archie Comics, who is a rival to Archie's girlfriend who also happens to be called Betty. It's possible that Stark's new armor system, Veronica, is also a nod to a Marvel Comics character called Veronica Benning, a physical therapist employed by Stark Enterprises. Veronica Benning helps Tony Stark recover use of one of his hands, which is interesting as in Age of Ultron, the Veronica system replaces Tony Stark's damaged Hulkbuster arm. In the Avengers, Loki was locked up in a steel and glass cage built to contain the Hulk in case he became a problem on board the helicarrier. Although that cage was never used for the Hulk, in Age of Ultron, Veronica traps him in another metal cage during the Hulkbuster scene. Interestingly, neither Loki nor the Hulk could be contained by either cage. When Iron Man tries to calm down the Hulk during the Hulkbuster sequence, he mentions Bruce Banner, which only makes the Hulk angrier. However, Iron Man realizes what he's done and says to himself, "Right, don't mention puny Banner," which is a callback to the comic books and the Hulk's catchphrase, "Hulk hate puny Banner." During the Hulkbuster scene, the Hulk smashes into a Crawford food truck. The name Crawford is likely a reference to Dr. Jeffrey Crawford, a physics professor who was Bruce Banner's mentor before he turned into the Hulk-like beast Ravage and became the Hulk's enemy. When Bruce Banner hulks out after Scarlet Witch messes with his mind, Tony Stark in his Hulkbuster suit tries unsuccessfully to bring Banner back by hammering the Hulk's head while repeating the words, "Go to sleep, go to sleep." That was a very Tony Stark interpretation of the lullaby Black Widow used to talk the Hulk back down to being Bruce Banner at the start of the movie. And it's an interesting role reversal from the Avengers movie, where the Hulk roared at Stark to bring him back to consciousness after he fell back to Earth through the portal. Oh, and it also calls to mind the scene where the Hulk repeatedly smashes Loki into the floor of Stark Towers in the first Avengers movie. During the Hulkbuster scene, the way the Hulk punches and smashes Iron Man as they blast up the side of a skyscraper is a callback with a twist to the first Avengers movie, where the Hulk saved Iron Man as they moved down the side of a skyscraper after Iron Man fell out of the wormhole. Remember that powerfully comic moment during the Battle of New York when Hulk punched Thor from the side, sending him flying off screen? Well, Age of Ultron gives that a twist during Iron Man's battle with the Hulk. This time we see Stark in his Hulkbuster suit punch the Hulk from the side, making the Hulk disappear off screen. Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige has said there's a Star Wars Easter egg which involves a character getting an arm or a hand cut off in all of Marvel's Phase 2 movies. In the Avengers sequel, not only does Iron Man's Hulkbuster shed an arm during his fight with the Hulk, but arms dealer Ulysses Klaue also has his arm chopped off by Ultron, which is a nice touch as Andy Serkis, who plays Klaue, is also in Star Wars The Force Awakens. While we're on the subject of Andy Serkis' character, did you notice the document on Klaue that the Avengers consult in the movie? Well, that revealed that he was hired to kill T'Chaka, the leader of the African nation Wakanda, to ensure access to the rare metal vibranium. Vibranium is what Captain America's shield is made of and what Ultron buys from Klaue in this movie. T'Chaka was the father of T'Challa, aka the current Black Panther, who we'll meet in Captain America Civil War before he returns in his own movie in 2018. So it looks likely we'll see Serkis back on screen as Klaue, the villainous enemy of the Black Panther, just as he is in the comics. In the salvage yard where Ulysses Klaue is based, there's a ship called HMS Churchill, named after the British wartime Prime Minister who took over from Neville Chamberlain during the Second World War. Chamberlain claimed to have brought peace for our time by arranging a peace treaty with Hitler, which failed less than a year later, leading to World War II. Tony Stark slightly misquotes the phrase as peace in our time to justify his creation of Ultron, and Ultron later repeats these words himself. When Captain America says to Tony Stark, "Earth's mightiest heroes, they pulled us apart like cotton candy." It's a nice nod to the fact that the Avengers are labelled the Earth's mightiest heroes in the comics, and to Marvel's animated TV series, The Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which ran for 2 seasons from 2010. In the movie, Helen Cho is a renowned geneticist and ally of the Avengers, but in the comics, she's known as the mother of teenage genius Amadeus Cho, who's often featured in stories alongside the Hulk and Hercules, and from December 2015 is the lead character in Marvel's Totally Awesome Hulk series. When Tony Stark sifts through his AI chips to find a replacement for Jarvis, the one he picks is marked Friday, which is a reference to the AI program that Stark created in the comics to act as his secretary. By the way, Stan Lee also sometimes referred to 1960s Marvel secretary Flo Steinberg as their Girl Friday. There are also at least 2 other chips that Tony Stark doesn't use. One is Mark Jocasta, who in the Marvel comics was a robot created by Ultron as a mate. The second chip that Tony doesn't use is only shown in part, but looks like it could be labelled Tadashi. Tadashi was Hero's older brother and the creator of Baymax in Disney's Big Hero 6, which was inspired by the Marvel comics of the same name. It's interesting that there are also lots of Iron Man references in Big Hero 6. For example, Baymax's first flight is reminiscent of Tony Stark's test flight in the first Iron Man movie. And in the San Francisco Nerd Lab, there's a cat wearing flying boots a la Iron Man, a robot assistant that resembles Stark's robot helper dummy, a student who obviously modelled his facial hair on Tony Stark's, and what looks like an arc reactor. And it's also possible that the Big Hero 6 nod continues in the Hulkbuster scene, where we see the Hulk and Hulkbuster's fist bump send a shockwave through the streets. Okay, so it wasn't exactly the same as the fist bumps between Baymax and Hero in Big Hero 6, but it is interesting that the vice president of production at Disney Interactive Studios has called Baymax the Hulk meets Iron Man, which is what we see in that Age of Ultron scene. Fox may have the movie rights to Marvel's X-Men, but that didn't stop Age of Ultron giving a cheeky nod to the mutant superheroes after Hawkeye's motivational speech to Scarlet Witch, who in the comics has mutant powers and parentage herself. As Hawkeye leaves Scarlet Witch to fight in the Battle of Sokovia, we see a brief shot of his hand, out of which seem to pop some Wolverine-style claws. However, they're actually 3 sets of arrows that the bowman's readying to battle some bots. The S.H.I.E.L.D. tech who refused to launch the Insight carriers in Captain America the Winter Soldier has a brief cameo in Age of Ultron. Unlike in the Winter Soldier, where he was saved by S.H.I.E.L.D. Agent 13, Sharon Carter, in this movie it's former members of S.H.I.E.L.D., Maria Hill and Nick Fury, who save him from being attacked by one of Ultron's robots. The incredible circle shot that showed the Avengers ready to take on the aliens in the Battle of New York is revisited in Age of Ultron's epic final battle against Ultron and his drones in Sokovia. Ultron fires on the Hulk from his plane during the Battle of Sokovia, which leads to the Hulk leaping onto the plane and throwing its pilot Ultron down to the ground. This is a nice callback to the first Avengers movie, where a pilot also fired on the Hulk while he was on the helicarrier, which caused the Hulk to jump onto the plane and throw out the pilot. As the flying Sokovia starts to fall to the ground, Vision comes in and saves Scarlet Witch, in a nice little nod to the comics where Vision and Scarlet Witch marry. In Marvel's Ultimates comics, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch share an incestuous relationship, and actors Elizabeth Olsen and Aaron Taylor-Johnson decided to play a little with that idea, so in Age of Ultron, you'll often see them close together and holding hands. The superhero team's famous comic book catchphrase, Avengers Assemble, never made it into the first movie, and at the end of Age of Ultron, Captain America opens his mouth to address the new Avengers, but all he gets to say is Avengers before the camera cuts to the credits as his mouth forms what looks like the letter A. Ironically, Joss Whedon did use the famous catchphrase in Season 4, Episode 1 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when Xander talks about getting the team together. Speaking of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Whedon included a blink and you'll miss it Easter egg to his Buffy spin-off show Angel during Thor's visions of Asgard. In the archways there are 3 men wearing masks. One is a wolf, one is a ram, and the other is a hart or deer. On Angel, Wolfram and Hart is a law firm and front for a trio of demons called the Wolf, the Ram, and the Hart. There's also a wink to Whedon's Firefly TV series too. When the Avengers are in the Quinjet after the Hydra raid, Tony Stark asks Jarvis to take the wheel, and then we see a Jarvis is my co-pilot sticker on the cockpit dash. That's a nod to Firefly, in which Wash is the pilot of the spaceship Serenity, and a reference to the popular car license plate frames and stickers, which include the words "Wash is my co-pilot." Age of Ultron also sets up some of the background for Captain America Civil War, including the conflicting philosophies and burgeoning opposition between Cap and Iron Man. First, there's Stark's words early on that Cap is the boss, while I just pay for everything, design everything, and make everyone look cooler. Then there's Cap and Stark's clash over the suit of armor around the world issue. Stark deliberately hides his Ultron plans, only sharing them with his science bro Banner. Also, while Stark is worried the Avengers won't be able to deal with another alien invasion, Cap takes a different position, that they'll win or lose together. Oh, and of course Cap, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver all unite to try and stop Stark's AI project. And don't forget the exchange between Stark and Cap while they're chopping wood at Hawkeye's house. Stark says, "I don't trust a guy without a dark side," to which Cap replies, "Let's just say you haven't seen it yet." By the way, that next Captain America movie will be based on Marvel Comics crossover storyline Civil War. In the mid-credits scene, we see Thanos put on the Infinity Gauntlet and say, "Fine, I'll do it myself," which sets us up nicely for the Avengers Infinity War Parts 1 and 2, in which it looks like Thanos is going to stop relying on others like Loki to do his dirty work for him and start kicking ass and taking Infinity Stones himself. Thanos' gauntlet is similar to the one in Odin's vault in the first Thor movie. However, this one is for a left hand and has no Infinity Stones in it yet. Indeed, Kevin Feige has confirmed that there are two different gloves in the MCU. Now, Thanos is the MCU's big bad. He's the someone who's been playing an intricate game and made pawns of the Avengers, to quote Thor from the end of Age of Ultron. Not that Thor knows it's Thanos who's the puppet master at that point. But thanks to the vision he has, Thor does know about the incredible, potentially destructive power of the 6 Infinity Stones. So far, only 4 stones have appeared in the MCU: the Yellow Mind Stone, the Purple Power Stone, the Red Reality Stone, and the Blue Space Stone. That means at some point in the movies running up to the Infinity War, we should see the Soul Stone and the Time Stone appear. Now let me know in the comments below, what other Easter eggs and references did you spot in Avengers Age of Ultron? If you enjoyed this video, do please share it, hit the thumbs up button, and subscribe for my Things You Didn't Know videos, as well as movie reviews and interviews. Thanks for watching and see you next time! Yippee-ki-yay, movie lovers!